Welcome to the Upside Podcast, powered by Upside Global and hosted by Julian Blinn, founder and CEO of Upside Global. The Upside Podcast is listened to weekly by over 6,000 sports and tech executives from all sports leagues and teams in the United States and around the world. Julian has been developing technologies for professional sports teams for over 10 years and has worked for major tech companies along with sports tech startups. In each episode, Julian interviews global leaders in sports to share knowledge on emerging technology in the sports industry and how these technologies can help improve the performance of individuals and organizations, both on and off the playing field. And now here's your host, Julian Blinn.
So this week we had the honor of interviewing again a group of MLS sports performance executives to talk about the latest trends in the world of sports performance and rehabilitation, especially in the MLS. So I'll make some big introductions. So first we have Jason Henn, the former head of rehab for LAFC. Jason also is the head of business development North America for OneBase Health. So welcome back, Jason.
Thank you, Julian. Excited to be here.
It's great to have you back. And then we have Mike Messer, the head of rehabilitation at Nashville SC. So welcome back as well, Mike.
Thank you, Julian. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you back as well. And then we have Darcy Norman, who's the head of performance for the Chicago Fire and MLS team as well. So welcome back, Darcy, as well.
Thank you, Julian. Pleasure.
It's great to have you as well. And then we have Gavin Benjafield, the head of performance for LAFC. Welcome back as well. It's been a while, but I'm glad to have you back as well.
Yeah, glad to be back, Julian. Looking forward to this.
It's great. So, hey, guys, first question I'm going to ask you guys. We're obviously right in the middle of the MLS playoffs. And so it's such a demanding stretch for players and staff. From a performance medical standpoint, how does the period change your overall recovery and training strategy? And are there any best practices or lessons that you learn to help the players stay sharp, fresh through the playoffs? Or Darcy, when it comes to a walk-up, how do you adjust the intensity of the game, right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump in and kind of just give the journey of what it looks like. Decision was the 18th of October. MLS Cup final, which obviously we're all aiming towards, is the December the 6th. So you're looking at a 7-week and some change days duration of the playoffs. And what makes it the most challenging is that there's actually a FIFA window bridging almost the first half and the second half of the playoffs. And that's what actually is at least my biggest challenge working with LAFC, is that we have 7 players away on international duty. We completed the first round of best of 3 in 2 games. So we almost ended early. And there's a good 21 days between our last game, the best of 2, and then semifinals, which then also has a number of our guys, 7 guys away. So that really is a challenge to keep players engaged, keep the rhythm going, keep the cycle going, keep the competitiveness going. I think today we had 8 second team players in our training session because of the number of players that are gone. And you lose the quality, the sharpness, the feel, the cohesive feel that you've built. I mean, we've taken 10 months to get this point of like building a team, building the cohesion, building the rhythm of a competition. And now we're basically completely out of rhythm.
But Gavin, you kind of knew the schedule ahead of time, right? So you knew you were going to lose some players who were playing internationally, right? So,
yes, no, I mean, you predict it, you know it, and now it's, well, some teams chose to not take too much time off, and then you go into some training blocks. We chose to give the players a good number of days off because we felt that it was important to kind of disconnect. We gave our internationals the opportunity to actually fly early, get into the time zone of the countries that they were actually going to go play in. But you're still training. I think we're going to end up somewhere in the region of 12 to 14 training sessions before we play that game. And 12 of those training sessions are without your international players. So you can't fabricate the team cohesion without those 7 players actually being there. So right now, my biggest focus would be the players that have played the most number of games and minutes. We're actually having them more in a maintenance and rest and recovery phase. And the players like the subs, maybe guys that haven't had as many minutes, maybe they've come back from injury, we're actually using this as a mini loading period. And then the last block before the game will almost put everyone on the same program of like a tapering program and getting them ready. But I have no control of those 7 players that are away. And so it makes it incredibly challenging to go to Vancouver, play a semifinals, only having 2 days of training with your full starting 11.
No, that makes sense. Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll add on top of that.
Yeah.
Having worked with Gavin for 6 seasons, and during that time that we were together, we hit the playoffs 5 of the 6 years. We had 2 MLS Cups and we won 1 of them. And like you said, it's considerably gotten harder just due to the schedules or the amount of games in the season. Even this year or the last 2 or 3 years, the first round had best of 3. So that throws a lot of more games and complicates things even more. But what I would say is, regardless of the schedule or like these guys going away, they're distractions, right? And of any high performer, whether it's the athlete or us as performance staff individuals, I think we pride ourselves on our ability to control the controllables, and that's really ourselves. And throughout the several years with the LAFC, when we actually pulled it off, I feel that the attention to detail was a little bit better, like even within staff, because it is a long season. We can all complain that, oh man, we don't play for 3 more weeks and we have Vancouver and it's away and it's on turf. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So I think the faster that we as staff can actually hone in on what we need to do, then that bleeds over to the players. And then ideally, the year that we won, we had Vela, we had Chiellini, we had Bale, we had guys that had been there that don't get rattled. So that was a way, like, if we weren't rattled as a staff, and then you have high achieving players that have super strong mentalities, that's where it kind of all bleeds down, where you're able to kind of get through get through the mud in a sense,
Yeah.
to actually pull it off. So I think it always starts with, I like to look like at the context of it all, and then like, what are we actually trying to do? And then we have geniuses like Gavin, Darcy, and Mike that can actually put it together of like, okay, we're going to load them this way, subs. Like, I always looked at myself, and Gavin knows me well, I'm like, kind of look big picture, and then how is this guy feeling? How's this guy feeling? We got to wake this guy up. This guy's not focused. I think that's the art of it all, putting it together in addition to like the true performance pieces that we typically talk about.
And Jason, from a recovery modality perspective, you mentioned that using, for example, the hyperbaric chambers, right, was a big help for you guys. And you had to get them quickly back on the field, right?
Yeah. Oh, and that was in 2022. That's when we brought it into the club. And again, we have to be able to sell it to them in the sense where, like, hey, we're in a heavy period right now. Right now, you've been through X amount of injuries. Right now, we need to get the most out of you. I know you don't want to get in the chamber every day. I know you don't want to do these things, but for the betterment of the team and yourself, this is what we need to do. Are we good? Let's lock in. Let's lock shoulder to shoulder. That's LAFC's mantra. How can we lock shoulder to shoulder as a staff, as a team, as a brotherhood in a sense, to get the job done? That's when we won in 2022 that I really saw. And then when 2023 came around, it was a little bit different. But that's kind of like my perspective looking back at 6 years.
That makes sense. Thank you, Jason. Darcy or Mike, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jason hit it well, right? Like, because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. There's the case of, like, for me, there's not that many games in the MLS. You know, when I was at Bayern and Roma, we were playing in all 3 trophies, you know, all year round. You're at 60 games, all your players, you know, similar to what Gavin mentioned, are off playing international teams. So it was a rinse repeat all year long. So there's that side of it. And then there's these kind of gaps and windows that you just got to accommodate for. And it, you know, again, to Jason's point, it kind of is what it is. And so you got to make the best of it. And it's really kind of the Shackleton experiment of managing expectations, telling them what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. So when it happens, nobody's surprised, and you know, it's how it was laid out. And so, yeah, and you just got to do your best, obviously, to prepare. And I know we were kind of talking off offline about, why is this the way it is, and how could the structure change, and I think it's tough. It like in situations like this, it kind of reminds me that MLS is still a developing league, and there is talk of obviously it moving over to the European schedule, which would be nice because then all your national team stuff is kind of behind you as you roll into the end of the season. So everybody's got full squad, full complement of what they're doing with the pathway of fighting for kind of any end trophies. And I think it's just tough with the playoff structure because, you start off with X amount of teams, 16 teams, you play it over a time. And if you get knocked out right away, then those guys are weighing by the wayside. And if they're national team players, then they got to figure out how to stay fit. And, we went through that in 22 in prepping for the World Cup in Qatar also, because it was at the end of the year and in a different time. So in December. And so, we had to run our own camps to help guys that did get out of the playoffs to kind of keep going. And that just came from really good communication with the various teams, knowing that we all want the best for the athlete. And if we're doing the best for the athlete, then we're doing the best for each other at our club or their respective, national program to help them achieve their goals, which is to be successful there. So, yeah, it's kind of, there's no perfect recipe, I don't think. It's the nature of the beast. And you just got to do your best managing those expectations, to Gavin's point, get them mentally in the right place. And then, just do your best with what you got.
And Darcy, to your point about maybe adapting the schedule so it matches the European Soccer League schedule, like starting in, August, right? Basically, would you think that would ever happen, or it's just impossible?
No, I mean, there's chatter around it, so I think it could happen for sure. And it would be good. It would have it would bring a whole nother set of problems, right? Like the outcome you get is right for the system that's provided, and you change the system, you change the outcomes, and so you have issues of playing in colder weathers. You got, it's just going to come up with another set of circumstances that you got to work around, given the fact that the country's big, the travel is a lot. The temperature gradient from top to bottom, right to left is also high. Like we're sitting in snow here. Well, Gav and Jason are probably, going to go to the beach after this and work on their summer tan. So it's an interesting country to play in that regard.
That's a good point. Thank you, Darcy. Michael, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I won't expand too much on what they've already covered, but the MLS playoffs are just a bit of a roulette. You just don't know what you're going to get. There's so many uncontrollables, and so what it really does come down to is what can you control. We spend the whole season trying to get these guys in a rhythm, and even little things like having to change the training cadence, because now we're playing games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday nights, which we don't normally do in the regular season. So there's just a lot of things that you get thrown a curveball, and you just kind of have to manage it as best you can, like these guys have said. And then maybe the one other thing that I'll add, just to put maybe a little bit of like a medical spin on it, you start to look at some of the, maybe if you have some guys who have been out, maybe in the season, you take a little more conservative approach. Maybe you start to look at that a little bit differently with the season winding down. Maybe you start to push a little bit, take a little more risk. Obviously, if the player's willing and, staff are willing as well. But it just puts a little bit of a different tint on some of the rehabs you have and your approach to them.
Well, that makes sense. Hey, the next question, because we're right, the MLS offseason is right around the corner, right? So typically, how do you guys approach the MLS offseason? Do you take time off to recharge, or is it about, reflection, reviewing data, maybe hiring new staff members, or maybe doing a tech audit to prepare for the next season? What do you guys typically do during the MLS offseason?
All the above. It feels like a different season of different work. But you know, for us, we're not in the where our off season is done because we lost out of the playoffs, unfortunately. So yeah, for us, it was giving the guys just like, hey, walk away. You know, it's always tough when you're pushing for something and then you don't make it. So just to everyone clear their head, and then we're running optional mini camps starting December 1, you know, all the way up until when guys report back on the 10th. You know, we'll have a little break at Christmas, but just trying to provide them the opportunities to come in and train and stay, you know, fresh, because it is a long season. I think it's gotten shorter over the years, which is in a good way, because it's hard to go, you know, such a span without playing that and ramping up fast and hitting games. And so just at least keeping guys ticking over, working on stuff that they need to work on to get better and improve as players. And then, so, you know, they have some off-season programs to kind of get the party started, then, you know, optional mini camps that we're going to run through December and into January, and then we'll get the party started again. So that's how we're handling it.
And Darcy, do you feel like this is, you know, I mean, your work never stops, basically, right?
No,
So,
no, it's a constant audit. Like, to your point, we're going through all the reviews, summarizing the season, what worked, what didn't. You know, this staff here at Chicago is kind of year one for us, all as a group, a lot of different people coming together. So there was a lot of system structures, things that we needed to get organized, and you know, we're kind of building the boat as it was moving from day one, because you know, it was all these quick hires and getting going, and then you're off to preseason. So you know, we're kind of building a lot of this stuff as we were going. So you know, for us, our theme this year was process, transparency, and legacy. So it was writing down everything you did, writing down you know, kind of, we, you know, like almost our things are like a digital wiki. So everything is kind of linked, hyperlinked, connected, so that anybody can find anything at any one time. If something were to happen to anybody, you know, I can click a button and understand exactly all the bits that they're touching that I might not appreciate in their day to day. And so, yeah, that's the big one. And now, you know, we're putting all the pieces, kind of getting a V1 together on all that stuff. And then, you know, putting plans in place to figure out how we're going to do it better next year. And, you know, since everything is kind of documented and written down, we can start to be, you know, pinpoint of what's missing still, and then what we need to kind of do a better job at refining.
and there's no restriction. So if your players wants to come to the facility and train during the off season, like in the NFL, they can do that, but I think the performance staff, medical staff, is not allowed to assist them unless they ask to
Correct.
help. But in
Yeah,
the
the
MLS,
coaching, so the mini camps are run by performance and medical staff, and it is totally optional. So like, they have their home programs, they come in, but you know, we're just kind of coordinating, organizing, you know, guys, so that if, you know, they want to play small sided games or do some different drills to improve their skills, you know, we can help support in that way. So it's just nice, efficient, and done. And then obviously they have access to the facilities and all the bits here to get what they need done from a lifting or, you know, speed development or whatever it is.
makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Darcy. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the off season, it creates another challenge, because if you don't make the playoffs, then your off season could really start as early as decision day, so the day after that, 19th of October. And honestly, depending on how deep you go into the playoffs, if you go all the way to the MLS Cup final, it's like, if you win, there's a great 2-day celebration, and then everyone just wants to disappear because it's been an incredibly long season. And if you don't, well, then you cry for 2 days, and then you disappear and you go on your vacation. So one strategy that I've kind of adopted is I use the November FIFA window to complete my staff reviews for the year. We do that little bit of a mini audit. We're in a slightly different situation. We've had good carryover of staff for the last 4 years. It's been under the same coach. So my challenge is almost more around, all right, are we doing things that we should continue doing in 2026, or should we actually be stopped doing certain things and kind of innovate in a different direction? Also with the challenge of a new coach coming in 2026, you almost can't be making plans when you don't know who the coach is going to be. So I've switched our focus a little bit more. We've had an expansion, especially in our second team and our academy staff. So my focus for 26 is actually going to be more the integration of the different departments and the different tiers within the club. So how can we integrate better with the second team, with the academy? How do we have our processes across all of those rather than pioneering, which we've done for like the last 7 years, just pioneer. Now I think it's going to be more just a big audit, and how do we get our other teams to be even more closely linked to what we're doing to do in the first team. But the off season, like, it's a super important time, but as Darcy was saying, there is no rest. You're always thinking. There's always I start with a blank canvas. I'm like, whatever we did last year worked for last year, but for 26, it's not going to work. So I need to break it all down, to build it all back up again, to figure out what combination is going to be the right combination with the players that remain, the new staff that do or don't come, and obviously we'll have a brand new technical staff, so that could redirect us dramatically or only slightly. We don't know yet, and then plan once we do have that in place.
Oh, that makes sense. Yep. Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else?
Yeah. Our off season started Saturday night, and this is the end of my 5th season with the club. And I would say no off season has been the same in 5 years. You try to do all of the things that you listed in your question. I think those are important to do in the off season. It just looks different every year. And what I would say, particularly from more of a rehab standpoint, I've had some seasons where I have one guy that hangs around with a long-term rehab. I've had some seasons where I've had 5 or more hang around for a long-term rehab. So it doesn't really feel like the off season at that point. But I do think one of the really important things is to appreciate what it is, which is the off season, and you have to find some way, shape, or form to recharge and get ready for the next season. Because, like each of these guys have said, it is hard. We're always thinking it's hard to turn that off, but you really do have to try to find a way to recharge your batteries a little bit, collect yourself. And I think that comes down to the individual. For me, try to take a few days to go back home, see, our immediate families. And then the days tend to be a little bit shorter in the off season. So you try to take advantage of that extra time that you have on a day-to-day basis, and just make sure that you're ready for what the next season is going to bring.
And when you have players who are from abroad, right? They go away, go back to their family. How do you keep track? How do you stay in communication with them just to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do? How do you guys do that? It's
definitely a challenge. Particularly if the players' first language is not English. That can become a big challenge. I think that my answer now looks very different than what it would have been year one. I've learned some lessons through the years, but I think the big thing is establishing expectations before they leave, making sure that they understand that when they come back day one of preseason, this is where we expect you to be. And, we're going to try to communicate between now and then as best we can and facilitate that as best we can. But ultimately, if, you're choosing to not be at the facility and go somewhere else around the world, like, this is the standard that we're going to hold you to when you come back. So having very clear expectations.
So has there been cases where a player came back and was just not in shape? Like, you don't know what happened, but clearly it wasn't doing what he was supposed to do.
Yeah, it might happen a time or two.
I'm sure.
Might seem a little bit too diplomatic. It always happens, for sure. Julian, how we approach it is we go radio silence for 2 weeks. We're not going to make any contact with any players for 2 weeks. You're not going to hear, you're not going to get a text, a phone call, anything from us. And after that 2-week period, again, depending if it's the starters, maybe it's a 3-week period because their off-season plan looks different to a sub's off-season plan. Yeah. But typically a sub from the 2-week mark onwards is going to start getting check-ins. And so we break up the squad relationally. Who do I have the best connection with, and who can I hold accountable over the off-season? And I check in, it depends. Sometimes I check in twice a week. Sometimes it's only once a week. How's the plan going? Where you're at? How's the family? A little bit of a life balance, work balance kind of combination. But yes, there are some guys that don't need check-ins and they come back flying on day one. And there are other guys that I just hope that we don't have a 9-week off season, because it's going to just be the guys in such a deep hole. And then to try and get him out of that hole in a very shortened 5-week preseason. And then the new coach wants to play as many friendlies as possible. I'm assuming that is just, the appetite for risk goes higher and the risk of injury also goes higher as well. So, I think having a good relationship with your players is vitally important, but giving them that time where they're totally disconnected is just as important, because they've invested so much time physically, mentally into this season that they need that time as well.
But like you said, Gavin, right? Some guys, they know what to do. They're always in the gym, but then some other guys, they're not used to that. You have to push them all the time, right? So every case is different. I'm sure. Anybody else? Any feedback on that?
I'll quickly say Gavin's always been really good at segmenting. Like we talk as a group all the time. So I was like, okay, Jason, who are you in charge of? Gav, who are you in charge of? So we would segment it that way. And to add what Mike had said, it's actually, you actually have like two different populations. You have like your healthy guys, and those are segmented, like Gav said, the starters, the subs, whoever play based on minutes. And then you have your rehabs, you have your long-term rehabs, and it really depends where they are in their rehab cycle. You can have Max Crepeau break his leg on MLS Cup, and that's an acute injury. How long is this going to take? How can we plan it out? So that's going to be different from someone that's already been rehabbing 3 or 4 months into that cycle. So it's I remember that off season after MLS Cup, I'm like Mike, I had maybe 2 weeks off, maybe. So, but it always kind of depends, and it really is a balance of, like the uncontrollables and the art. If you can kind of put it together in the off season and keep that constant communication, and there are the players that don't get back to you, and you document how many times you reached out to them, because Gav or Steve's going to ask like, hey, what's going on with so-and-so? I was like, look, I've texted him this many times. I've called him this many times, because maybe or maybe not, there's times where the player goes, no one reached out to me. Look at my WhatsApp. Look at my WhatsApp. So it's that communication, as long as you can do that in the off season as well as you can, then you can kind of come back. We come back a little bit. We come back before the preseason, where we are game planning there, and we predict this person that we haven't heard from, how is he really going to come back? So we're already planning 2 or 3 steps ahead. So that communication is key.
Yeah, and like you say, WhatsApp, you can see if someone looked at your text anyway, but you can't cheat, right? So, anybody else?
Yeah, I'll maybe just kind of echo what Jason was saying is, for us wrapping up the season, it was like, okay, obviously we have work to do. We failed out of the playoffs. So who wants to get better? And you're looking for a team of guys that are putting up their hand to say, yes, we want to get better. We all have goals. We all want to get there. So they make a verbal commitment to what's happening. And then, to Jason's point, it makes the conversations easier. It makes the programming easier, and staying in touch with the guys so that when they come back, you can kind of hit the ground running. And hence, as I mentioned before, our optional mini camps, due to our situation, is we're doing everything possible so that, when we start the next season, there's no excuses as to why we're not kind of hopefully hitting the ground running.
Has there been occasions where some guys were subs, not starters, they came back really fit? Like, what happened? Like ready to go. You know what I mean? They work on their own. Maybe they get a private coach, and you saw a major transformation.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like us, right? Like players are just people. Sometimes you have some light bulb moments where you really start to realize like you're at a fork in the road, and you have to make a strong decision of like, what am I committing to this truly? And I think certainly that's the nature of player development, especially as young players, and their commitment and, challenges that they've had throughout the year, that they can reflect back on, and hopefully in a positive sense to help upgrade their decision-making process and how they're approaching their next step. Like every team, hopefully they're getting better, and that's what ends up driving performance is that kind of relentless pursuit of better. And so I think, those are the players you want to have on your team. And I think, you probably, a lot of teams filter the ones that don't want to do that out, especially at the higher level teams versus the ones that are just existing. So, I think it's a part of the industry that we're in.
Yeah, good point. Anybody else? Any comments before I jump to the next question? Okay. So the next question, I think someone mentioned, playing on the turf, for example, right? So given how the MLS teams often move between grass and turf surfaces, how do you adjust your training and recovery strategies based on the surface that you're about to play on, right? So what are the key differences in how you prepare players for each? Because in the US, there's a variety, right? If you look at Europe, it's mostly grass, if I had to guess, right? But in the US, it's different because you got football team, you're sharing the field. And how do you manage that, to prevent potential injuries? Because it happens too, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Gav.
I always just have too much to say, so that's why I'm going to jump in. And I think that the medical staff are definitely going to be able to answer this question the best, because for me, it's always very contextual. So let's paint a picture of you play on turf on a Saturday and you're in a density period. So you're now playing the Wednesday and the Saturday. Both of them could be at home. I certainly, from my experience, but Jason and Mike are maybe going to attest to it differently, is grass field players that train on grass, play on grass, go and play on turf, and especially when it's an age factor added to that, they just take that extra 12 to 24 hours to come back from joint pain, this hurts, that hurts. And so contextually, if we have a midweek game, oh my goodness, then we're throwing the kitchen sink at the recovery. We may adjust what our match day -1 looks like, because we still know that some of these older players are still in a recovery phase from that. So yeah, Mike or Jason, do you guys want to jump in with that kind of picture that I painted? What does it look like for you guys in the treatment room, and are there increased complaints from the players?
Yep, another good point.
Yeah, I would say, well, you're going to be in Vancouver in a few weeks, so if I were there still, knowing that's going to happen, like the ground reaction forces are going to be that much more, whether it's the post-practice recovery strategies, like really just pushing that a little bit more. We always talked about in the mornings, so there's some guys that don't like to do proactive steps. So it was really up to us to like grab them, like, hey, come in. And then now in this period where you're going to have 7 starters that are out, you're going to grab players that weren't even used to being on the table. You're putting them on the table, and they're like, what? I was like, look, we're doing everything that we can with what we have at this point. So if there's a situation where you're going in, you're going to feel your best. Don't worry about the starters that are not here. We can't do anything about them right now. So at least leading up to the game, and then like if I'm going specifics, like trigger point series for your foot, make sure it's mobile, blah, blah, blah. And then like Gav said, when LAFC beats Vancouver,
let's go.
Understanding that it does take another 12 to 24 hours for these to kind of turn around. We're going to do what we need to do on our part from the performance and medical staff, but also being able to relay that to the technical, like, hey, this is what we're going to see. And then hopefully there's that cohesion there where we can actually start the training cycle in the way it should, or a little bit lower than you would otherwise. So I think that communication's key.
But are you always concerned when you're going to go play, somewhere where there's like, it's a new surface, turf, and are you always concerned about that or no?
Yeah, I would say.
Well,
because they're not used to it. LAFC, we don't play on turf. We play
right.
on turf. So
I think it often comes into discussion with players that may be carrying an injury or carrying a past injury. And like if we had an ACL player and he was reintegrating back into team minutes, and now all of a sudden we're going to play 3 away games and all of them are going to be on turf. Yeah, and it was not a critical part of the season, or like as part of the season that Mike says you're going to take the most amount of risk, then we would be more conservative and we'd speak to our coaches and go like, yeah, you know what, this is not the ideal reintegration for this player in his minutes. Let's be a little bit more conservative in terms of how many minutes that we're going to allow him to be playing on turf. Because yes, there is definitely a different factor involved when he's playing at home on grass or away on grass, and then also away on turf. So it's just taking all factors into consideration when you're trying to make the best decision possible. And that's most of our jobs. We're just trying to collect as much information as we can and make the best decision that we can with all the facts that we have, and then draw the player into that conversation as well, and the decision as well, and then obviously the technical and head coach as well.
So you try to be proactive.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of our job is to see things before they actually happen, and to try and kind of navigate through the muddy waters that sometimes aren't very clear. And yeah, you just hope that the decision that you're making is more right than it is wrong.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else?
So I've had a little bit of an interesting experience in Nashville between two different coaches. So, one coach took the perspective when it came to turf of, he actually wanted us to train on the turf for at least 2 training sessions prior to the match, which led to a lot of complaints from some of those senior players, like Gavin mentioned. So, you kind of take the multiplier of the complaints that you get from guys having to play on turf in a match, and then add 2 days of training on top of that. And then, the medical staff is pulling their hair out trying to get these guys to turn around after those 3 days. Both of we've moved training facilities in the time I've been here, but we did have access to a turf field at both places. And, the turf field we have now with the new coach kind of sits vacant. He has, bought in a little more to the I shouldn't say the player complaints, but just, I guess, the aftermath of what you deal with from the players when you do give them that extra time on the turf. And so, I think there was the realization of maybe we actually get more out of them when we manage this a little bit more, rather than, try to get them to see how the ball bounces on the turf, 2 days leading up to the match, so that when they get there, out on the match, it doesn't feel foreign to them. I just think some of the problems that, we were dealing with after the fact maybe outweighed the, I guess, technical benefit, if you will, from that extra time on the turf. So yeah, I'd say overall as a medical staff, you're going to expect it. The guys with the tendinopathies, like Gavin said, maybe you're a little more conservative with, someone who's coming back from like an ACL injury. And you make sure that everyone is aware of that, and you just try to manage it as best you can. But at the end of the day, if it's your star player, it's probably going to be more about the recovery on the back end rather than the management of minutes in the match.
But Michael, do you think it usually helps to have the players train, maybe if you have a turf surface before the game when they're going to be playing? It doesn't really help.
I wouldn't. Honestly, it would be interesting to see if you look back at some of our results from times when we did train on the turf and then going into a turf match. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think for a couple of years there, Nashville was known for having a little bit of an older roster, and we definitely had to deal with a lot with some of those players on the back end after training or playing on turf. So
you might want to check those stats next time. You can argue the coach. It doesn't help. So yeah, thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add I think also just educating the players, right? Because what are they recovering from? Is it the turf or what the turf is causing? So is it more muscle soreness versus joint soreness versus just overall general neural fatigue for maybe a perceived harder surface? So then tailoring your recovery strategies to those various complaints. So, if somebody's got more of a joint issue, you might, change their programming to more isometrics, get them in the pool for unweighting, more cold-based scenarios to help with inflammation, irritation, where if it's more muscular soreness, it's a whole kind of different set of pieces where it might be more mobility and contrast and flow-based stuff and aerobic, and versus a neural fatigue where it's just, more of a meditation and sleep and controlling some things. So I think there's a variety of ways to handle it that also puts the players in a little bit of the driving seat, right? You're providing the tools, and then they can kind of feel and do a little bit of a choose your own adventure that, deals with what they're dealing with, as well as, giving them some autonomy to what also feels good to them, instead of saying, hey, everyone's on this path. So yeah, just other ways that we've kind of handled it, and I think it works good. And Jason alluded to it again earlier. It's a lot of it is just the mentality of how you approach it. It'll only be a problem if it's a problem, and so don't make it a problem. And I don't think the injury rates or research isn't that conclusive. I think we just make this assumption that, oh, it's turf, it hurts, it's this, because I don't like playing on turf for whatever reason. But when you look at the research, and I'm not saying if it's not in the research, it's not true, but there hasn't been any hard evidence that turf creates a higher level of injuries. There's the anecdotal piece, but that's the brain driving the bus, and I think that you just got to take that for a grain of salt. And everybody's doing it, everyone's has to go through it, and so you kind of get on going, and then deal with what the symptoms are to provide the best prescriptions in that process.
Yeah, and then so Darcy, tomorrow morning we're publishing an analysis. We looked at the research, the studies on turf versus grass. I don't think there's any evidence and one is better than the other. There's different factors. So watch for that. It's coming out tomorrow morning. So,
Nice.
Guys, last question I want to ask you is, so looking ahead in 2026, right, when the World Cup will pause the MLS season, how do you anticipate that break that will impact your regular season rhythm and the player management, right? So how are you going to manage that? And have you started to think about how to maintain the player readiness or the team cohesion during that period? Because it's going to be tricky, right?
Yeah. I think, like, for us, just evaluating the schedule, we had 9 congested fixtures this year. So that's defined by 2 or 3 days between games. Next year, we're on pace to have a minimum of 21 over the course of those 2 blocks. And then, it'll accumulate, if we do well and advance and so forth in the various, whether it's the Cup or Leagues Cup or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, 100%. We've talked about kind of restructuring our periodization during the week as a result of that. And then, I think, to me, it's almost like a Mexican kind of league where you got 2 seasons. You got the first part where you're going to get after it, prepare like you normally would, and go strong in a congested, pseudo congested time frame. And then you get a break and a little reprieve, and you come back and you hit it for a second season. And then it's the accumulation, trying to just win each segment, and hopefully in winning each segment, you win the whole thing. So just taking it down in its bits, and, and then also letting the guys enjoy watching the world's best and finding inspiration to come back and get it going in the second half. That's generally, I think, how we're kind of looking at it.
And Darcy, I'm not going to ask you who's going to win the World Cup. I'm French, so I'm going to go for my.
I'm all over the place these days, so it's I'm all over the place. I think I might just go get out of the States and go to Europe and just watch public viewings in Europe.
Yeah, good idea. Anybody else? Yep.
Yeah, I think Darcy hit it just right on in terms of it's going to be a controlling the density, because you're now going to have 2 really compacted seasons, and it's almost going to be like a sprint to the World Cup, and then you're going to come up for air, and then you're going to have another sprint race. Just looking at it, if you're not in the Champions Cup, you're going to have 15 games in approximately 13 weeks. So that's super manageable. That's 1 game a week. But if you're in the Champions Cup and you go deep, you could be having 24 games in 3 months. That's 8 games a month. That's almost a double header every single week for the first 3 months. So it's a big challenge. I think that you're also going to find that you're going to have 2 preseasons, because you're going to have to, it's a 53-day break, the World Cup. So how much time do you give the players off after that first half of the season? As Darcy said, if you're kind of considering it 2 seasons, so how much time do you give them off? How much time do you have to take to get them back up again? So that's considered like almost a mini preseason. So if you did 3 weeks off, 3 weeks mini preseason to get yourself ready for the next one, I think it may depend on how deep you go in the first half of the season, of how long you give players off, how many have gone away to the World Cup, when are they coming back, how do you manage that for the second half? So again, it's this art of working out what's the best fit for you and your team, because my plan may not be the best plan for Darcy in Chicago. Honestly, I don't think that it would. But it's for us to work it out, that what works for us and our team and what's going to get us in the best possible winning situation in that first 13-week sprint, and then the second one after the World Cup.
And I'm sure a concern is, you know, if you have an international soccer player goes to the World Cup, comes back injured, right? You don't want that.
No,
right? Like in the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, where I think Darcy were, that, you know, that must have been tough for the, especially the European teams, right? Because it was right in the middle of the season, right? So how do you adjust for that?
Yeah, I think it was just that, you know, they took their pause. I wasn't working in any of those teams at the time, so it's hard for me to say what their challenges were. But you know, it worked relatively well, I think, for the national team, because it was kind of like your traditional European thing going into a tournament, a summer tournament. So it's I can't, you know, like I said, I wasn't working in a European team at that point, so don't know what kind of things that they were faced with. But you know, it was great from a national team because guys rolled in from a good competitive season. They had, you know, they were in form and going and you know, so you didn't have to pay attention. It was more the MLS group that got knocked out of the playoffs really early, and you know, you had to get them ready from October to, you know, darn near December or end of November when things kicked off. And that was, you know, a bit of a challenge. We had a pre-World Cup camp for those guys. And, you know, I think Gavin alluded to it, just trying to balance out all the different, where guys were at any given time. You had multiple kind of periodization cycles for different guys that you were trying to just mesh it or blend into one path. But it was a team effort, not only, you know, like obviously the guys were in our care, but we did a lot of work with the MLS teams, you know, to ask for their help to support their players in programming and consistency and off-season programs to help from a developmental standpoint. So it was definitely a village from that perspective.
But now you're on the other side now.
Yeah. And I mean, I always just take it, you know, we're a player first program, always. And if you do everything for the player, then, you know, they're going to be successful for their respective team, their country, as I mentioned earlier. And so I'll always work with wherever, you know, the group's going to give them the best chance of success. So that, you know, they can hit the ground running. And, you know, because if they do well in their program, then that's going to help confidence, and, you know, they're going to come back and have motivation to keep driving and rolling forward. So, I'll always, you know, I'm always one to help wherever we can to support the player in their endeavors.
That's great. Thank you, Darcy. Mike or Jason, any thoughts on the World Cup and how that's going to disrupt, you know, the schedule? How to manage it?
I can speak from the perspective that I won't be there next season, but
Yeah,
I really look at these gaps as opportunity, really. And like Gav said, you're gonna have to segment the players. Like you have the players out with their national team, and then within the subset of players that are still there, who are they? Are they subs that haven't got enough minutes? Do we send them down to the second team so they're playing more? Do you have the ones that have played a lot and they actually need more rest? Or you have the ones that are in rehab and you've actually bought some time for them? So with that being said, to be able to segment between, let's say it's these 3 different lanes, and then even within the performance staff and the medical staff, we have to be flexible too. Just as much as we want to rest, they want to rest too, but we have to do what's best for the player and the team. So sometimes we don't like it, but we may have to sacrifice ourselves a little bit more, where maybe I didn't take as long as a vacation, but like Darcy said, it's player first. We have to do everything we need to do for ourselves, but mostly the player, to get the final result. So if I need to come in a little bit more to see a certain player because I'm in charge of him, that's what needs to be done. But also to have that cohesiveness within the staff that, hey, well, can you take over for me here? I'm going to stay a little bit longer. But that's when you can build a good cohesive unit, you can do it. But it's an opportunity to help these guys that, are in different boats.
Yep, no, good point, Jason. Mike, any comments on that as well? The World Cup?
Honestly, not too many. I think that some of the other topics that we've broached in our discussion today are going to come into play with another big break like this. Gavin brought up Champions Cup, the front half of the season. I think second half of the season, you have Leagues Cup. So it's almost like rinse and repeat. I guess you could look at it, we talk about reflecting. You could almost look at it like, okay, how'd the first half of the season go? Because it's about to happen again. So what could we maybe do different second half of the season? What worked, what didn't. It's certainly going to be something new. Looking forward to having the World Cup here in the US, but it's going to present its own challenges behind the scenes that, all of us are going to have to deal with individually. I think that, one of the things we've talked about is, cohesion and getting better. And, Darcy, I think in my career with the US, this was the first time I experienced it. And then, it's been brought to Nashville a little bit with our change in coaching staff. But during some of these down periods for the guys that are around, gamifying it basically so that, every drill, there's points up for grabs. When you're in the gym, there's points up for grabs. And then at the end of this, little mini training period, there's a winner and there are prizes. It seems like the guys buy into that. They put in a little more effort. So who knows, maybe we'll have something like that when the time comes for the guys that are still in market.
Not great points, guys. Hey, we ended the podcast, but I want to thank you for your time today, and always great talking to you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening. To access past episodes and other research, articles, and analysis of sports technology, please visit our website, theupside.us. Subscribe to the Upside newsletter and receive full access to our sports tech business letter and website. Royalty-free music is provided by ibaudio.com. The Upside podcast provides timely insights and interviews with global leaders in sports technology. Until next time, keep looking to the upside.